Good morning, everyone. I hereby call to order this morning the 11th meeting for the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission for calendar year 2013 and ask that you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on this morning's agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 23rd meeting. And I believe, Commissioner Cawley, you are the editor of the minutes.
Yes, Chairman, I am. I have reviewed those minutes, and I move that they be approved as submitted.
Second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted from the May 23rd meeting. The first matter on this morning's public meeting is from the Bureau of Administration. It's the assessment for broadband outreach and aggregation fund approval. I move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Turning to the single item from our Bureau of Audits this morning is the single case involving Newtown Artesian Water. I move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Turning to the Director of Regulatory Operations in the matter of EDC customer account number access mechanisms for electric generation suppliers, I move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Chairman. I have a statement which I would like entered in the record as if I had read all of it. This is a recommendation from our Office of Competitive Market Oversight regarding a proposal to provide procedures to facilitate electric generation suppliers' access to the electric distribution company account numbers of newly contracted customers in instances where the account number is not available from either the customer or from the eligible customer list. This often comes up, and I've seen it happen many times, when this commission will hold a fair at which we allow customers to sign up. And experience has demonstrated very often that people don't carry around their electric bill with them or have the account number with them. And therefore, it's difficult to sign up even though they want to do it. So this is a recommendation from OCMO, our Office of Competitive Market Oversight, for the very limited purpose of dealing with this problem, but it does not deal with the situation and this facility that is being proposed here will not be available if, for instance, the customer has just permanently thrown away his or her utility bill and therefore does not have the account number, or if the customer has elected to just receive an electronic bill, for instance, and does not receive a paper bill and doesn't have the bill handy, and a telemarketer calls or a door-to-door salesman calls. This facility will not be available in that instance. So because of what is being done here is good, but it's narrow. And I encourage the parties to continue to review the effectiveness of this very narrow attempt to cure the problem of customers not having their account number available when they are more than willing to sign up for an electric generation supplier. A more expansive use of the system I think is in order, but we need more evidence that it's not going to be harmful to customers' privacy. So I'm all for what we're doing here. I would just like to encourage parties to develop evidence, if you will, that we can expand it at a future date. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley, and I would like to associate myself with your statement. I think what you hit on is trying to make this a seamless transaction for customers And I know some of our suppliers here in Pennsylvania have alluded to that as they're doing some of these external events in and around communities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, making it, again, a seamless transaction for customers, but letting the customer know that they have the peace of mind that they're dealing with an honest broker, in the sense that when they give their account information or the utility provides it to them, that they're able to get that customer signed up in a timely manner. So I commend you for your statement. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting the statement of Commissioner Cawley. The last item on our regulatory operations agenda is an announcement for the appointment to ratify the appointment, of Dennis Hostler to the position of Director of Bureau of Audits. I move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
On the discussion note, I'd like to recognize if Dennis is in the audience today. Dennis, are you here? He's probably doing a field audit, but I would like to, I know my colleagues join me in congratulating him on this appointment. I do believe that Dennis possesses the character, drive, and aptitude to fill the shoes, and they're big shoes, Mr. Lesney. I see you out there. Big shoes to be filled, and I think it speaks to the leadership team that you've put together and the team of audits, and I think we have selected an excellent hire here this morning. And again, I know my colleagues join me in that. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Dennis. Turning to the Office of Special Assistance, in the case involving Jerome P. Baylor, TA Action Enterprise, I move the adoption of all items on page 4, 5, including the single item on page 6 of the agenda involving PPL Electric Utilities Corporation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Continuing on to page 7 of the agenda, we have the matter involving the PUC Investigation Enforcement Division versus the Philadelphia Gas Works. And this morning there's a joint statement with Vice Chairman Coleman and myself, and I'd like to recognize the Vice Chairman for the purposes of the motion. Vice Chairman Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd ask that our joint motion be entered into the record as though we had read it in its entirety. Before the Commission today for disposition is the initial decision of Administrative Law Judge Angela Jones, adjudicating the formal complaint filed by the Commission's Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement against Philadelphia Gas Works, related to the tragic natural gas explosion that occurred on January 18, 2011 in Philadelphia. By way of background, I&E filed a complaint with the Commission in December 15, 2011, following an extensive investigation into the cause of the January 18, 2011 explosion. The parties subsequently entered into settlement negotiations, which culminated in a joint petition for settlement that was filed with the Commission. According to the terms of settlement, the parties agreed that PGW would pay a civil settlement of $400,000, which shall not seek recovery in any future proceeding before the Commission. Secondly, PGW would contribute $100,000 to the existing smoke alarm programs operated by the Fire Prevention Division of the Philadelphia Fire Department. Thirdly, PGW has already implemented or will implement in the future 19 different modifications in its operating procedures, all of which are set forth in Appendix A of the settlement. While we are moving to approve the agreed-upon settlement in contribution to the Philadelphia Fire Department's Fire Prevention Division, we remain far from convinced that these amounts adequately penalize PGW for the numerous actions and inactions that culminated in these devastating losses. The Commission is, however, limited by the statutory civil penalty limits that were in place at the time of the incident, and by the fact that PGW, as a municipally owned utility, operates on a cash flow basis. Given these limitations, though, we agree that ALJ Jones's evaluation of the settlement and find that it is in the public interest with one modification. Just as with the Commission's recent disposition of the I&E informal complaint against UGI Utilities Gas Division for the catastrophic explosion in Allentown in February 2011, we believe that PGW should explore enhanced leak detection measures and file a pilot program to utilize one or more of those leak enhancement detection measures. However, if at all possible, PGW should utilize a different vendor than UGI to give the Commission and all interested stakeholders the opportunity to evaluate more than just one of the various technologies available. Therefore, we move that Philadelphia Gas Works file a pilot program designed to test enhanced leak detection measures within 45 days of the entry of the final order in this proceeding, or of the tentative order becoming final by operation of law. Interested parties file comments on the pilot leak detection program within 20 days of the filing of the Commission's approve, modify, or reject the pilot program within 75 days of its filing. Third, that the parties of the settlement notify the Commission within 5 business days of entry of the tentative order whether they accept the additional terms imposed by this motion. Fourth, the tentative order be considered a final order in the event that neither of the settling parties object to these modifications. 5, if either settling party objects to the additional terms imposed herein, the initial decision be reversed and that this matter be remanded to the Office of the Administrative Law Judge for such further proceedings as may be necessary. And 6, the Office of Special Assistance prepare a tentative order consistent with this motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gardner, I'd like to recognize you for purposes of a statement. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like for my statement to be entered into the record as if I read it in its entirety. The natural gas explosion, which occurred on January 18, 2011, was a tragic event which took one young man's life and also caused severe property damage. As tragic as the event was, the loss of life would have been much greater if the Philadelphia Fire Department had not taken prompt and decisive action very early in this episode to clear a perimeter around the gas link. If not for the actions of the Philadelphia Fire Department, this tragic event could have been an incredible catastrophe. I wish to acknowledge and commend the Philadelphia Fire Department for a professional job well done. The settlement that we approved today means that PGW will have to revise its process for responding to natural gas leak, retrain its employees regarding their procedures, and pay a civil penalty of $400,000, plus make an additional contribution of $100,000 to the Philadelphia Fire Department smoke detector programs. I believe that this settlement is a fair resolution of this case and that PGW will have to pay $500,000, the maximum civil penalty that the Commission can impose upon a utility. However, I note that had this incident taken place today under Act 11, the Commission could have imposed a civil penalty of approximately $1.6 million. Because PGW's organizational structure is different from our investor-owned utilities, there are no shareholders to absorb civil penalties. As such, and unless allowed, the taxpayers, as such, and unless disallowed, the taxpayers of Philadelphia and our PGW's ratepayers will eventually pay any civil penalties levied by the Commission in rate. When the Commission expressly forbids recovery through rates, taxpayers of the City of Philadelphia must bear the burden. Beginning in 2008, due to PGW's precarious financial position, the Commission chose to handle violations in a manner that would help to preserve PGW's financial viability. By not levying civil penalties against PGW, the Commission also shielded PGW's ratepayers and Philadelphia taxpayers from additional financial obligations on top of those they already face. Over $1.2 billion in long-term debt, $25 to $30 million a year in long-term debt service. And in 2008, they were looking at $13 to $14 gas prices. PGW is also obliged to make an $18 million contribution to the City of Philadelphia. And as we all know, they have some of the highest customer assist cost burdens in the Commonwealth. Today, fortunately, PGW is no longer in the crisis mode that it was back in 2008. This is thanks to the emergency relief provided by this commission in 2008, which gave the company the critical rate income needed to restructure and pay down its debt while imposing much-needed business performance standards. The incredible expansion of low-priced Pennsylvania-produced natural gas has also helped PGW's finances tremendously. Today, shielding Philadelphia taxpayers from civil penalties is no longer in their best interest. Civil penalties and their effects on rates will send clear and transparent signals to customers and taxpayers regarding the city's management of the utility. We will leave it to the customers and the ratepayers of Philadelphia to judge the quality of that management. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting the statement of Commissioner Gardner. And I'd simply add that I'd like to thank our Gas Safety Division for the thorough investigation that was done in this case. I think the Vice Chairman said it in the motion. It is a tragic reminder. It's tough to say that to give the family of the young man that lost his life an apology for what happened. And it speaks to the fact that this company needs to aggressively replace its cast iron bare steel. And to the credit of the legislature, those tools are now afforded to that company, that municipal gas entity, to aggressively go after there's over 1,600 miles of cast iron bare steel. And so today, I think it's a reminder that we take gas safety seriously, but we also take this whole notion of infrastructure replacement seriously as well, as demonstrated in the unanimous support here this morning for reaching this settlement.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Collin.
This is one of the finest statements I've ever heard at the Commission. And it's a change of position for Commissioner Gardner. It's a change of position for me. And it reflects the frustration that this Commission has endured for many years with this company. We have thought before, and I have publicly said before, it doesn't do any good to fine this company because the customers end up paying the fine rather than penalizing management or shareholders. We have attempted, when we have given rate relief to this company, to impose reasonable conditions on rate relief, only to be rebuffed and told a flat no. We will not abide by your reasonable conditions, and we are really powerless to do anything about it. I reiterate my position that this company needs to be sold to an investor-owned company. I'm not finished, Chairman. I'm just getting rolling with this company.
Is this a 15-page statement?
No, it isn't. It isn't. I think the frustration that I feel in this is shared, at least by Commissioner Gardner. I suspect we all feel it. This company can't replace its bare steel and brittle cast iron for 80 years. How many more explosions are going to happen in the city of Philadelphia before this company is sold to someone who is going to accelerate that replacement? And how long do we have to endure the fact that we've got the Philadelphia Gas Commission, which is a complete redundancy and makes management's job more difficult, and it makes this commission's job more difficult? I am at the point where I'm not only of the view that this company ought to be sold, and until it does, this commission's jurisdiction ought to be relinquished back to the city of Philadelphia and let them stew with this mess. This is ridiculous, and I don't know what it's going to take to convince the legislature to do something about this, because we have all the responsibility for this company now, but none of the real ability to make things happen that ought to happen with this company. So I apologize to my colleagues for that outburst, but this case really ought to bring action by the legislature to solve this long-standing problem in Philadelphia. They saw fit to give the taxi cabs back. They ought to take back this company. And I'm tired of having the responsibility and not being able to really to do anything about it, to bring this company within normal regulatory principles. End of speech.
Commissioner, no apology, and I appreciate your candor and your openness, and again, I can say I can associate myself with your frustrations in dealing with this entity. I know Mayor Michael Nutter joins you as well. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Continuing on with the Office of Special Assistance, I move the adoption of the last item on the bottom of page 7, including all items on page 8, 9, 10, and concluding with the PUC investigation and enforcement versus PNN Transportation and Leasing TA Service Truck Lines Incorporated.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objection? The motion passes unanimously. Continuing on with the Office of Special Assistance, in the case starting with Keystone Cab Services, I move that we approve all items on page 12, 13, concluding with Diamond Taxi Cab be adopted.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Chairman.
Commissioner Cawley, I'd like to recognize you for purposes of a statement.
I have a statement which is captioned only for the Good Cab LLC case, but it really applies to all of these. This is another instance where we all are concerned about public safety, and we're concerned about it for those who use these cabs. The issue is whether we may properly deny a petition for waiver of our requirement that a taxi cab be no longer than 8 years in age. The idea behind that obviously is that a cab any older than that probably is not suitable for public service and might be unsafe. We have a friendly disagreement among ourselves about whether our standards for granting such petitions for waiver are adequate. I don't think they are, even though I agree with my colleagues that safety here should be paramount. The procedure is that someone petitions for a waiver of the 8-year limitation. And using internal guidelines, our staff makes a decision whether to grant the petition. If they don't grant the petition, they simply say, no, you're not worthy of getting an inspection to determine whether the cab is safe. It's a real task to try to inspect the many taxi cabs in Pennsylvania. And therefore, if our staff determines internally that an applicant is not, quote, worthy, there's no inspection done, the waiver is denied. Unfortunately, we don't have a duly promulgated regulation which sets down due process standards for denying or granting the waiver. And there is the rub as far as I'm concerned. I don't have any quibble with our staff. I think they're acting in good faith, and given our limitations on the number of inspections that are possible. But as much as I don't want to vote no here, I feel compelled for due process reasons to dissent. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley, and I would also add a statement, again, I think we just have a friendly disagreement. First, I think that TUS in this particular case found that Good Cab did not pay its assessment on time. And the second point I'd mention here this morning is that our Technical Utility Service group determined that Good Cab's application lacked sufficient justification as to why its vehicles were worthy of consideration to remain in service. So I believe this morning that our Technical Utility Service Group acted in accordance with Commission policy and the law in rejecting Good Cab's waiver request. And I think it is appropriate that we deny the appeal. And I would remind any transportation provider out there, the rules are very clear. You receive a letter, you probably get a reminder letter, and you can actually call technical staff And so on a going forward basis, I think it's incumbent upon a business owner that you understand deadlines. The old excuse that the dog ate my homework is not acceptable with this commission. If you're a physically fit, physically responsible operator, you know the rules going into this. And so this morning, again, I respectfully recognize that Good Cab was clearly afforded appropriate due process in this proceeding, and the decision to reject the appeal is consistent with the Commission's policies and regulations, given the importance of these waivers and the Commission's responsibility to ensure that carriers provide safe and adequate service to the citizens of the Commonwealth. So I support the staff decision here this morning, and I'll note the statement from Commissioner Cawley as well.
Chairman, I better ask that my statement be read in its entirety as if I'd read it, which I do.
For the record, correct.
Thank you.
And mine as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Whitmer.
I'd like to associate myself with your statement.
So noted. Thank you. Any further discussion? We'll note the objection of Commissioner Cawley and note my statement on this particular issue. To conclude the Office of Special Assistance agenda items, I move the last item on page 14 of the agenda and including all items on page 15 of the agenda. Vice Chairman Coleman is reminding me, Madam Assistant Secretary, the calling of the vote on the last case of Diamond Taxi LLC, including all items prior to that started, I believe, on page 12 of the agenda. The vote was 4-1. Is that noted for the record? Thank you. Continuing on, I mentioned we're going to move the last item on page 14 of the agenda, including all items on page 15 of the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We'll now turn to the Bureau of Technical Utility Services. In omnibus fashion, we'll move all items on page 16, 17, 18, 19, including the item of J.G. Naughton, Inc. It's an application for transferring 100% of its stock, and I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. The next case is Equitable Gas Company's long-term infrastructure improvement plan required under the provisions set forth in Act 11, and I move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Chairman.
Commissioner Cawley, I'd like to recognize you for purposes of your statement here this morning. Is it a joint statement?
This is a joint statement dissenting on behalf of Commissioner Gardner and myself. Before us are the petitions for approval of the long-term infrastructure improvement plan and the distribution system improvement charge of Equitable Gas Company. Act 11 sets forth 7 required elements which utilities filing for a distribution system improvement charge must include in their long-term infrastructure improvement plans. One of the elements is the manner in which the replacement of aging infrastructure will be accelerated. The Commission's final implementation order directed utilities to maintain acceleration of infrastructure replacement. Utilities that have already taken substantial steps towards increasing capital investment to address the issue of aging infrastructure should reflect in their long-term infrastructure improvement plans how the distribution system improvement charge will maintain or augment acceleration of infrastructure replacement and prudent capital investment. Based on the information provided by Equitable, it is evident to Commissioner Gardner and me that it has not recently taken substantial steps towards increasing capital spending in the past years, even in nominal terms. I ask that the motion be included in its entirety as if I had read it all. The remaining part of the motion goes into how the company as a matter of overall capital spending, as a matter of historical activity, and as a matter of overall projected capital spending, Equitable does not meet the acceleration requirement. In essence, we believe that the company may, simply because it is in the middle of being acquired, has not met the requirements that we believe are necessary under the law. And we simply believe that this justification that is being acquired does not comport with our statutory obligations. The merger may not go through. And in the meantime, we believe that the company should meet the statutory requirements. For that reason, Commissioner Gardner and I respectfully dissent.
So noted. Any further discussion? We will note here this morning the objections of Commissioners Cawley and Gardner, and the motion passes 3-2. Continuing on, I move the adoption of the remaining item on the bottom of page 20, including all items on page 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, including the first case on the top of page 28, which is OLS Inc. TA Georgia Online Services, and I recommend that the staff recommendation be adopted.
Second.
Any discussion?
Chairman,
Commissioner Gardner.
on item on page 22, Bachelor Energy application, I wish to be recorded as recusing from the vote.
So noted. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. As a footnote, Madam Assistant Secretary, on page 22 of the agenda, Commissioner Gardner will be recusing himself on the Christine Batchelor Energy Supply case. Moving on, we have the quarterly earnings report filed by the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, and I move that we adopt the staff recommendation here this morning.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Gardner.
Thank you. I wish for my statement to be entered into the record as if I read it in its entirety. Act 11 provides that the DIS return on equity shall be equity return rate approved in the utility's most recent fully litigated rate case. When a utility does not have a return on equity from recent rate case, Act 11 provides that the ROE shall be the equity return calculated by the Commission in the most recent quarterly earning report. I believe that the DIS ROEs established in this quarterly earning report are inflated given present market conditions. The DIS ROE set for the electric industry is 10.2. A more reasonable number would be closer to 9.5. The DIS ROE set for the gas industry is 10.1. A more reasonable number would be closer to 8.46. I accept that we should not send mixed messages to our utilities by introducing unnecessary volatility into the ROE calculation. However, the reason for linking the allowed ROE to the quarterly reports is to allow the Commission to recognize trends in the financial markets, to allow continued ROE well above or below the financial market is neither in the consumer's best interest nor the long-term interest of our companies. Presently, capital is available and continues to be inexpensive. The inflated DIS ROE issued today are not indicated by the market as being necessary to attract investment capital at reasonable rates to Pennsylvania. I caution the Commission not to move too far away from market fundamentals and to remember that ultimately ratepayers pay these returns. Therefore, I respectfully dissent.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Chairman. I also wish to dissent and associate myself with Commissioner Gardner's statement. Again, this is a friendly disagreement among us. My philosophy is that it's fine to reward a meritoriously performing public utility, but it's on an individual basis. but it's quite another across the board to reward all investor-owned utilities, and especially it's not proper to do so when they haven't done anything yet. And therefore, I associate myself with this excellent dissenting statement.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. And in the spirit of collegiality and reminding that I guess we're all having a casual case of amnesia here at the bench, but we all agreed when Act 11 was adopted that we would take on staff recommendations. We would also, as a 5-member Board of Commission, also look at these trends as well. And so I find it a little bit, I want to use the word disingenuous, but I guess I'll use that word here this morning, that we agreed that under the DISC mechanism, which we have on the books now with our water companies, there is a quarterly adjustment to these ROEs with a 5-member Board of Commission input. So I recognize we all have our moving targets. Commissioner Gardner thinks a DISC mechanism at 9.5% and then 8.46 for gas. The majority opinion is supporting upward ROEs in the 10% range, which if you do the time to do your homework on other jurisdictions, you'd see that we are measured in our peer group on where we come down on those ROEs. And I remind you that in the last particular rate case involving the PPL electric utilities, we had a discussion about the holding company investment in terms of where they will deploy that capital, where they have regulated utilities amongst many jurisdictions. And I think the argument has been, I don't think you have to have an MBA from the Wharton Business School to understand that incremental investment in capital will be yielded and presented and deployed in Pennsylvania. So I just make that recommendation. I want to be very friendly to my colleagues. It is just a friendly, philosophical argument, but it is an argument that I think the majority feels very strongly about. And noting that we will note this morning the dissent of Commissioners Gardner and Cawley. The motion is approved 3-2. We'll move on now to the Law Bureau, and I move the adoption of all items on page 29, 30, and 31 of the agenda, concluding with Able Company, Ltd.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the Office of Administrative Law Judge, I move both items on page 32 of the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? This concludes our regular meeting agenda. We will now turn to the caring agenda. And this morning, I move from the Bureau of Audits all 3 items on page 1 of the caring agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Turning to the Office of Special Assistance, we have the single case involving Clean Treatment Sewage Company, and I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Continuing on with the Office of Special Assistance, we have the PPL Electric Utilities Act 129 Phase 2 EE&C plan filing, and I move that we approve the staff recommendation here this morning.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Turning to the case involving natural fuel gas distribution, defined purchase gas cost rate filing, we have the motion of Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. I ask that this very lengthy and arcane motion be placed in the record as if I had read it in its entirety. We have before us a stipulation in partial settlement of the rate investigation. It was executed by National Fuel Gas Distribution Corporation, the Commissioner's Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, and the Office of Consumer Advocate, as well as the Office of Small Business Advocate. And the recommended decision and the replies to the exceptions and reply exceptions. Assuming the recommendation to accept the partial settlement as filed is adopted, there is a remaining issue, and that is the proposed NFG change in the way it calculates the C factor component of the purchase gas cost rate in its quarterly update filings. The C factor component represents the forecasted cost of the gas purchased in the company's purchase gas rate. It's updated quarterly by the company effective on November 1st, February 1st, May 1st of each purchase gas cost application year, which begins each August 1st. In this proceeding, NFG proposes to change the denominator of the C-factor adjustment formula. I told you this is arcane, and it doesn't get any better. Instead of adjusting the C-factor based on the change in the projected annual cost of the purchased gas from the prior filing divided by annual sales volumes, that change will be divided instead by the sales volumes over the remaining portion of the annual application period for the November 1st and February 1st quarterly updates. For instance, under this approach, when the first quarterly update becomes effective on November 1st of each year, there are 9 months of sales volumes remaining in the application period. In this quarterly update, NFG will use 9 months of projected volume to determine the rates. And then in the second quarter update, 6 months of application year remain, and so forth. There will be a slight variation in the third quarter, which is described in the motion. This proposal is described by NFG as the truncation method of calculating the C-factor. NFG also proposed to cap the impact on the quarterly PGC rate resulting from truncating sales volumes such that the rate change will be no more than 25% of the rate that would result under the current methodology using 12 months of sales volumes. If the quarterly truncated rate exceeds the 25% cap, NFG will use the 25% capped rate in its quarterly filing instead of the full truncated rate. The whole purpose of this proposal is to address concerns regarding rate volatility that may result from the use of the truncation methodology. Both our Bureau of Investigation Enforcement and OCA had objections to this method, but based on the testimony provided, I believe, and I hope my colleagues, a majority of them believe, that this new C-factor calculation changes should be adopted, although we are certainly open to further evidence in the future if it is not working. And if it isn't, we'll know very quickly. But in short, NFG is correct that when the prices of gas are volatile, PGC rates must also be volatile if they are to reflect the actual price of purchased gas. To the extent that the Office of Consumer Advocate and our Bureau of Enforcement and Investigation Enforcement believes more stable rates are desirable, they can address this objective through changes in long-term versus short-term supply alternatives and weigh the volatility versus cost arguments in Section 1307F proceedings. Therefore, I move that the Office of Special Assistance draft an appropriate order consistent with this motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gardner.
I believe that the staff made the correct recommendation, and therefore I will dissent.
So noted. I would simply add, I was doing the calculation here, and Commissioner Cawley, I think I figured out the C factor. It's X minus 1 divided by Y equals C, I think. I will have Paul Diskin verify that for me after we're done.
Subject to check, I'll accept that.
Subject to audit, obviously. Yes, so, any further discussion? We'll note that the motion passes 4-1, recognizing Commissioner Gardner's dissent. Continue on with the Bureau of Technical Utility Services. I move both items at the top of page 5 of the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Turning to the bottom of the page, our Law Bureau items of performance measurement, consulting, performance metric review. From Silver Point, I move to adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And the item regarding gas beyond the main I move that we approve the staff recommendation here this morning.
Second?
Any discussion? Any objections? Commissioner Gardner.
I'd just like to say,
Yay! I've often thought we needed a little glee in this room, but that's certainly lively for a Tuesday morning. I will note for the record here this morning that the case involving the interim guidelines for natural gas distribution companies has been postponed till our August 15th meeting. And before we adjourn, Madam Assistant Secretary, are there any other items to come before the Commission here this morning? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Everyone have a great rest of the week. And again, we will be back on August 15th. We are adjourned.